Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. This is episode 401. I am joined on a beautiful Friday morning by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyFan89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Excited for the long weekend.
Yes, I am also excited for this offseason. Excited to.
I said long weekend, man.
I'm excited for the long weekend and the offseason. And we'll talk about the offseason. But before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland on Instagram. We're posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and have done so already, please like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and you can find all kinds of cool stuff on there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday. Prez. You also get access to Takes from Alfie's Bozos, our newest podcast that I don't host. That is hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gives you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod, where I rant with things and more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business, and now you get access to Strictly NFL, our podcast that is about, you guessed it, the NFL, that is hosted by Constantine Metricos. There are further tiers. There's $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. There's going to a variety of additional benefits. It listen to pod recordings, merchandise discounts, even potentially goes to a podcast alongside yours, truly, and whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible. Now, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds, and just about every sport out there. And to the website today, use mobile device to get into the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So the Knicks offseason is here. We can rest now. We don't have to lose our minds every other day because they're playing a game, and what does it mean, and what we don't have to worry about any of that shit.
Our watch has ended.
Our watch has ended. Hopefully less painfully than Jon Snow's did. But obviously the offseason for the NBA teams does not mean that they're done. No. This is actually one of the busiest times of the year for NBA teams as they prepare for the NBA draft and, of course, free agency and all the trades that both of those things bring along with them. And, the Knicks obviously took a big step this year as a team. I know that they ultimately lost in the second round, just as they did last year, but I think, all the underlying numbers and the kind of the circumstances surrounding how they got into the second round this year makes you feel even better about where this team is positioned than they were a year ago. But that does not mean everything is perfect. That does not guarantee that everything, as the great Tony Soprano once said, is hunky-dory. And part of that is when you're very good, getting to the level of championship contender, that final step, that bridge you need to, that gap that you need to bridge rather, it's very difficult. And the Knicks, to be clear, the Knicks potentially, maybe they're already there, because what we saw in January when the team was more or less healthy, aside from Mitchell Robinson, that team looked every bit of a championship contender, as we've seen a Knicks team look like in years. And they were destroying teams. They were running roughshod over the league. All that is fair. But it's a small sample, and we don't know if that would sustain. We were talking about this earlier this week, actually, in our great Strickland Discord, which again you can subscribe to. But the question is, Donte DiVincenzo has he had a great season, phenomenal season, and he had I would say an up and down playoffs, but personally, I can't speak for. I can only speak for myself. I came out of his playoff performance thinking to myself, like, the questions that a lot of people had about him as a playoff performer, much less concerned about that. I think he showed yeah, he might have ups and downs, but the ups will be there. He will give you some high level games, and he definitely did. Where I was a little bit concerned watching him, and not so much just him, but kind of how the team as a group operated. I thought the defense was not good, and part of the problem to me, especially in that Pacer series, but also in the Philly series, was the inability to stop dribble penetration. Um, Now, to be fair, Indiana is a very, very tough cover, and the Knicks were extremely shorthanded. And we know that this would not have been the starting lineup or the rotations if the Knicks had even close to relatively good health. I mean, they closed the series with a lineup that literally had zero starters from day one of the season. Brunson obviously goes out in the final game in game 7 and all those type of things. But um, my concern is twofold. It's we know that. Oh, look, there was a report. We can talk about the report later. There's a report that OG Anunoby, no guarantee, comes back. I call bullshit on that for a variety of reasons. But assuming OG is back, can OG defend the point of attack? Yes, he can. Is that actually the best way you want? Is that the optimal way to use him? Is that the best way to use him that elevates the team and all the and raises the entire group's level? I don't think so. I don't think that's what makes OG Anunoby a special defender. I think he can do it, but I don't think that's what makes him special. And we know Jalen Brunson cannot do it, and nor would we want him to do it given the offensive workload he'll be carrying. And I think it's safe to say we both agree that Julius Randle cannot do it. Yes. Um, so that leaves one Donte DiVincenzo. And I'm not there are things he does defensively well. To me, defending the point of attack is not and has not been something he does at nearly a high enough level to feel comfortable about the defensive balance of that group. Now, before I give you a chance to answer, I think it's worth mentioning that when that team was healthy, when they had Julius Randle in that starting lineup, they were destroying teams and they were one of the best defenses in the league. And that was with Brunson, DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Isaiah Hartenstein as a starting lineup. And obviously, you do have Deuce on the bench, who is a quality point of attack defender. I think we also saw that, as any point of attack defender will experience, you will not lock up good players or great offense at point of attack over a series. It's just not possible. It's never going to happen. And you need multiple options. And I'm not sure we should actually I'm just unsure about, is Donte a good enough option there to be the level to be a starter for this team in that starting lineup as it's assembled. I'm just not sure he's a good enough point of attack defender to truly compete. But I don't know. I go back and forth on this too, and I mean there are reasons why to continue to believe in him, as Stacy will talk about.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this though. I think that Prez, even before Game 6 in that Philly series, Prez had done a thread on how DiVincenzo was actually the most effective defender on Maxey, and Maxey probably was the most individually talented perimeter player we faced. I think right now he's a little bit better than Halliburton.
I don't know. Halliburton had his look. He just hurt his leg and his hamstring was hurting. He had a sore chest. By the way, sore chest is a crazy injury to go out for.
Well, didn't Grimes have that when he had like 1,000-pound weight on his chest every time he shot?
Yes, that's true. That is true.
I mean, so what did you think of his defense on Maxey, right? Because that was a tough point of attack assignment, and he was the most capable, clearly.
I mean, I'm just going to read out the numbers for Tyrese Maxey in the playoffs. Played one series, obviously, against the Knicks.
But most of the series, DiVincenzo wasn't defending him. It was that Game 6, really, where they made.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just read. This is what he did for the series. He had 29.8 points, he shot 47.8 from the field, 40% from three, just under 7 assists, just over 5 rebounds. So basically put up 37 and 5 on 48, 40, 89 splits. Yeah, to your point, DiVincenzo was not always tasked with guarding him. They put OG on him for a long part of that series, which, I mean, I'm not trying to, I don't think it's like some genius thing to notice that, hey, I'm not sure that this is great for OG Anunoby. Doesn't look like he's having a lot of fun doing this. But it's so, okay, OG struggled with him. Not a problem. And I think to my point, to the point I made earlier, this is kind of why, like, I'm like, yeah, I like OG a lot. I think he can guard the point of attack for stretches, but I wouldn't say that having that be his primary task is the best way to kind of get the juice, the defensive juice that you acquired him for. I think he's better when he's able to roam and provide that help defense in the second line and track wings and all those type of things. He's much better suited for that. I'm also not sure that I would say that Donte didn't guard him much before that final game or whatever. Like, he obviously did a very good job in that game. There's no doubt about that. But he started the whole series, as did Maxey. Like, they were matched up more than that last game. And Maxey had a great series. And again, like, I want to be very clear about this, because it doesn't matter what point of attack defender you get. Eventually, the best guys, the top guys, top offensive players, ball handlers, lead guards, however you want to, lead initiators, however you want to phrase it. If they see a guy enough, they're going to figure him out, right? We saw this with Brunson in the Philly series, or the first two games. It's like, oh my God, like, is Kelly Oubre and Nick Batum, are they his fucking kryptonite? And it was like, no, actually, they're not. He figured it out. You want options. I just don't think Donte is disciplined, and that part of the thing is the things that he does well defensively are about him not being disciplined. Like, he gambles, right? He gets steals. He is a good help defender. We saw him make some phenomenal chase down blocks in the half court in the playoffs and in the regular season. Like, his willingness to gamble and help are the things that give him those splash plays. That's what helps him and helps the team at times defensively. I think you lose that when he defends a point of attack, and I don't think he's a good enough consistent point of attack defender, because I think he struggles to get over screens, and I think that's asking a lot of him. I think you're stretching him beyond what he's actually good at.
Yeah, I mean, with Donte, I do think, I mean, that game 6 was the first time he was fully on Maxey, and I think he did a great job. I think in terms of defense, I think with him, Hart, and OG, they're guys who are best off ball roaming. The problem is they're also not, you can't really switch with Devo as much, right? And so, like, in game 7 against the Pacers, you saw, once they really just got hammered, they switched it up and started to they literally switched it up. Started switching screens more, right? Because they just couldn't stay with the Pacers. So I think DiVincenzo, he's 6'4", right? But I do think when it comes to being a point of attack defender, I think his decision making leaves a little bit to be desired. I think you were mentioning that he kept playing Halliburton to the right.
Dude, that was so fucking. I mean, and it wasn't just him. Like, a lot of guys were doing that. I mean, Hart did it too. And I want to be clear. Like, if you want to say that this was just not an ideal context to judge a lot of these guys defensively because of the nature of how stretched our rotation was and the minutes they logged and the accumulation of that, we know fatigue impacts not just your physical performance, but your mental, like your decision making, right? I think that's a fair pushback. I just think you see this with pretty consistently with Donte. Like, he's always going to bet on, he's like, every player has strengths and weaknesses. So one of his strengths is, again, his ability to get in the passing lanes. He's an event creator on defense, right? Event creators often have a weakness that is attached to that, which is they can get burned because they are going to gamble, because they are going to cheat off their man, because they are going to lose track of their man off ball at times. And that is a thing with Donte for sure.
Yeah. So my point is, and I think his decision making on both ends. Somebody I've seen people compare him to J.R. Smith. I think he's more polished than that, but I think there is kind of a little bit of that variability. It seems like there's at least one turnover game where he either throws a very ill-advised pass in transition or is loose with the ball. And his shot selection for a gunner isn't actually that bad. I think it's generally pretty good. But those are the kinds of things you're looking at. I think on the flip side, the guy took an insane volume of threes, and that need will not go away from the starting lineup, even when Randle comes back, especially when Randle comes back, because he really likes to. You ideally want Randle in that space close to the rim, and you need to create space for that. And so, you replace Donte with a guy like Deuce and have him take on some of those more some of those point of attack assignments. Sure. Deuce proved himself as a shooter, but you are really talking about elite shooting ability. I think during the regular season, DiVincenzo was at, first of all, just his playoff numbers, he averaged 18 points a game on over 40% 3-point shooting, 4 rebounds, 2.6 assists in the playoffs. So not only was he much better, last year he was 5 points a game. He's never averaged more than 6.6 in the playoffs. So when we say he exceeded like what our baseline was, he blew it away. But given what he had done previously, but Prez has talked about this a lot. He had 15 3-pointers per 100 possessions. Those are Steph Curry level numbers in terms of frequency, and he shot 40% on them. That is extremely, extremely, high volume, high impact shooting. And you knew that with guys like Brunson, Randle, even OG. We've seen him start to make more forays to the rim. So, I hear you on the point of attack defense. It clearly hurt them against the good Indiana team. But the number of upgrades from DiVincenzo, he's not
I just want to read these off. This is just 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. Steph Curry 1, 17.5. Sam Merrill 2, 16.4. Donte is much better than him. The playoffs were very revealing for Sam. Donte is third, 15.1. Klay Thompson, fourth, 14.7. Luka Doncic, fifth, 13.6. Tim Hardaway, 13.5. Alec Burks, 13.3. Lonnie Walker, 13.3. Sam Hauser, 13.2. Bogdan Bogdanovic, 12.8. That's the top 10. So you can hear that list and realize how many great shooters Donte ranks ahead of, and not just on volume, but his percentage was phenomenal, as you pointed out and Prez has pointed out.
Yeah, and he's got the versatility. He can get them off without much. You don't get those kind of, that volume without that. So you replace him on that starting lineup. That's fine. Maybe if we were to do it, maybe you do it with Deuce because he's still a pretty good shooter with a quick release. But in terms of offense, that's pretty much exactly the skill set you want from Brunson's backcourt mate. And
I'll throw this at you. Is anybody in that top 10 a guy that you were like, man, he'd be a much better running mate next to Jalen Brunson? I will say there's one name at 19th that I find intriguing, and that is Paul George, 11.6 threes per 100 possessions.
Where's Deuce at?
Just saying. Deuce McBride is 48th at 10.1 per 100 possessions. But I bet if we sorted this out, or if we were able to sort this out for like the last,
couple months.
Yeah, especially like once he started to start games, I would venture to guess that his numbers look much better.
Yeah, those were rookie numbers before, but he pumped them up.
Yeah, he was starting to.
But yeah, so that's kind of the point. I mean, in terms of in that top 10, who would be a good running mate for Brunson? That Steph Curry
Aside from
guy is
Dante,
pretty
it's
good.
like there's just really. I mean, Clay, I
We've,
guess, but like Clay's fucking 80 years old. I'm not interested in
we've
Clay.
seen Luka Doncic as the running mate to Brunson make a Western Conference Finals. No, I
Not
think
sure
Paul
we can
George.
get Luca, unfortunately.
Yeah, but in terms of the point is the guy who can do that and play high level defense. I almost feel like you have that on the roster in Deuce. He really struggled in that Indiana series, especially with TJ McConnell. But I thought he was better against the starters. I thought he was better against Halliburton. Obviously it didn't work out in the end, but I think that is an option. And I think maybe you add another point of attack defender. I know you're pretty high on Caruso. Obviously not the same volume, but in a series like this where you really want to lock up on D, having another guy to throw in there, I think that's the way you go. But let's talk about Paul George because I think that's interesting. I do think it seems like you have to trade Randall to get him here, and that trading a guy with yes a lot of miles on him, but he's still closer to his prime than Paul George and Randall. It's tough. So do you find a different way to kind of make that work? How are you thinking about that?
Well, one thing, to me, it's more like I always think to quote Tibbs, it's not about who starts, it's about who finishes games. I don't fully subscribe to that because I always think that's like a stupid thing to say if you're starting like Elfrid Payton. Like, no, I think it matters that you're starting Elfrid Payton, dude. But like Donte is obviously good enough where, and we've seen this lineup be really, really fucking good, and we've seen variations of lineups with Donte next to Brunson be very, very good to the point where starting him is not like some idiotic choice, right? But what I always think is you want options. You want to have different options that you can call upon and utilize in different situations when different things are required. And there are times where Dante's defense at the point of attack can be problematic. And if you're playing him in a lineup with, be it, the Josh Hart OG version or the OG Randall version, there are times where that will be problematic. And that is when you want Tibbs to have the confidence to put Deuce in maybe over Donte. And he did do that to his credit at various points in the playoffs. He closed game 5 and maybe even I think game 1 and 2 with Deuce over Donte. So like he deserves credit for that. But I think you want one more. I think the Knicks need one more point of attack or versatile type of defender that can at least do that. And that is why I want Caruso, because I think Caruso can give you that. And I think Caruso can give you off-ball stuff. Like I think there's multiple things that Caruso can do that make him an option. Like it's not unreasonable to think, yeah, there could be situations where you close with Donte and Caruso at the 2 and 3 next to Brunson. Like we've seen Tibbs use smaller lineups if he feels confident in how they can work. So like that's not unreasonable to me. But what I will say is I think a lot of this is about how you feel about and it's funny because we're going to be dropping this pod before we drop the pod that I did with Prez, but I did the pod with Prez before I did this pod. But when I was talking to Prez, I just think a lot of this offseason and a lot of the decisions the Knicks have to make and which paths they choose, they go back to Julius Randle and whether or not he's a piece that they view as somebody they want to commit to. Because he's entering the final year of his contract, technically as a player option for 2025-26. I don't think that he will be. I think you either want to extend him or you're likely to move him at some point. Personally, I would feel comfortable letting him play out the season without giving him an extension. That's how I feel about it. But we know the Knicks don't necessarily like to do that. So let's assume that this is a very significant, inflection point for them in their relationship with Julius Randle. The reason why Dante's 3-point volume is so imperative is Julius Randle is not going to give you a significant 3-point volume. And our centers, and I know this is not just about Julius, it's also about the centers. Our centers don't take threes. They do not take threes. So to make up for the fact that Randle, he decreased his 3-point volume this year, and I had no problem with that. He was very, very effective. I mean, I think we've talked about it. Plenty of people talked about it. I thought this was the best version of Julius that we had seen. So I'm fine with Julius decreasing his 3-point volume, but you've got to make it up somewhere else. And if you're going to play a non-existent 3-point shooting threat at the 5 at all times, then Donte becomes an imperative, piece. You cannot take him out of the starting lineup because the volume he gives you is so spectacular. Now, if you were to acquire a stretch 5, or if you move Julius out and you bring in more of a, kind of, I don't want to say natural, but more of a modern 4 that plays more perimeter oriented outside in and has a higher 3-point volume and is more of a slasher maybe. Or Tibbs has a come to Jesus moment, and now all of a sudden he's more willing to utilize lineups with Randle at the 5. So you're naturally getting a 3-point bump because you'll be playing more 3-point shooting guys in those looks, and you'll be spreading the floor out. Maybe that's another way to combat it. And those are paths the Knicks have to explore and consider in a way, and ultimately choose.
With OG here, it definitely comes on the table. Like, he obviously played the two of them with Precious a lot. But with two centers, if he's not going to play three centers, I definitely think OG and Randle together, I think he'd be more open to that.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so they have different paths they have to choose. And all these, I kind of like, as we have talked through this, and as we've talked about this here on this pod, and we've talked about it in the Discord, and we've talked about it with Perez, but like all these decisions are like interconnected. Like they're not standalone choices. It's not like, oh, well, do we have to upgrade on Donte or do we stick with Donte? It's like, well, if this, then that. If that, then this. Like there's a lot of options, and all of them, they all kind of impact each other. So, again, to me, like we can talk about Donte all we want, but so much of this offseason comes down to what do they think about Julius Randle? What do they think about their 5s? Like, do they want to stick with this archetype of 5 that they have chosen to roll with, and to their credit, have had a ton of success with? Like, these are the decisions they have to make, and they're hard decisions because the margins now are so much harder to move in your favor. Because why? Because you're actually a good fucking basketball team. You're not just you're a really good basketball team. It's a lot easier to improve from the 2020, 2021 Knicks, who were good but extremely flawed, and get to the level the Knicks are at now than to get from where the Knicks are now to, can you go toe-to-toe in a series with Dallas, Minnesota, Denver, Boston? To me, those are the 4 best teams in the league. And, if you believe in the January version of this team, then you're like, what the fuck are we talking about here? Run that back. Let's see what this whole group looks like when they're healthy. And that's that. It is very difficult to make decisions based on 1 month of a sample size of 1 month, no matter how good that month was, because we have no, that's it. That's the only look at we got at this team, at that starting lineup. And also, to be fair, like Donte didn't even play a significant amount during that stretch. Actually, I think he was averaging something like 24 and a half minutes or something. I can look it up in a second, but yeah, it's.
Because they still had Grimes at that point too, right? So.
Well, but he was closing games with Josh Hart of the 2. It was Hart, Anunoby, Randle, center, whatever. The point is, it's just there's a lot of decisions that the Knicks have to make, and they don't all have to be this offseason, right? We are team building is a 24/7, 365 process, but they are decisions that are looming down the line for them, be it this offseason, next trade deadline, next summer, whatever. And they're the decisions that they need to make to ultimately build the championship team.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to Randle, I think is the biggest question, as you mentioned. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Brunson, we saw, is capable of carrying an insane load. You probably don't want him to have to do that night in and night out. You would like a second scorer. We saw the luxury Boston has, right? Last night, Jalen Brown was pretty good. Someone at that level to take the pressure off of Brunson could be really, really devastating. We saw, especially with OG there, Randle was really good. Can Randle do that in the playoffs? That was data that would have been very valuable to have if he played this season. Because frankly, if he played in the postseason. Because frankly, I understand a lot of the concerns. Personally, I throw out that Atlanta series. As you mentioned, they started Elfrid Payton for 2 games,
and the entire construct of that team was just like,
you were asking.
It's also irrelevant to how the team is constructed now.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is when I'm talking about evaluating Randle as a playoff performer, we were asking him to be LeBron. So if the takeaway from that series is Randle is not LeBron, awesome, whatever, right? Last year he was hurt. He ended up getting. I know we had debated a lot at the time. Body language wasn't great, effort wasn't great, and you're out there. You get the expectation is high, but if you're judging whether the guy can be the number 2 to Brunson, I don't think we've gotten a completely fair version of that. On the flip side, there's still reason to be skeptical, right? You do want the ball in the hands of people who are making quick decisions, making smart decisions. But he's a walking double team. The Knicks have the floor spacing now to really, even earlier in the season, he was making better decisions simply with things like putting the shooter on the far side, and forcing the help to come from there, right? Even if it's a guy like Hart, so your reads are easier, right? With him getting the ball closer to the basket, it also forces the double teams to come from farther. It gives them the ability to kind of to make better decisions, right? To see things happen much more slowly and not have to be kind of Jokic level as a processor or whatever. So there's reasons, but if you don't believe that, right? And the last thing I'll say is playing with OG unlocked him on defense too, because Randle's strength is really he can switch a little bit, and he's a big body. What he isn't is a guy who's great at kind of again processing and thinking 2 moves ahead of the defense, and frankly, consistent effort. But OG made his job a lot easier by taking on some of those big wings, by being a great help defender, which allowed Randle it simplified his job. So you have all of those things that make it like maybe it's viable. But if you don't believe in Randle as that number 2, then you're going to have to bring in another number 2. That could be Donovan Mitchell, could be, it could be Devin Booker, could be whoever, but you're going to have to bring in another guy. At that point, it is not very likely that guy will be a very good defender. And at that point, if Randle is your number, even if Randle is your number 3 option, then the contract becomes a little bit, right? If you're I think the max he can get is 43 a year in an extension.
His max extension is 4 years, 181 million. So however that bakes out,
it's about like a 45 million a year, right? As your number 2, that's fine. If he's going to be number 3 and we're bringing in another star player, that's where it starts to feel like a misallocation of resources, given that you're probably starting 2 to 3 bad defenders at that point. And if you have a Brunson Mitchell backcourt, you probably want another. So that's the question. If you believe he can be that number 2, you can keep starting these 2-way guys that the Knicks have around Brunson and Randle. If you don't, regardless of what you do with the bigs, you're probably going to move on.
Yeah, I mean, the Randle part of it all makes things tricky just because he's such an enigmatic player, and there are things he does so well. He's and the Knicks look, they clearly, I don't care what anybody says, this idea that they were better off without him, they didn't need him, all that shit is, it's absolute bullshit. Like, you want to know why they missed him? I'll tell you why they missed him. Because Jalen Brunson was running on fucking fumes for the last 2 games of this Pacers series. You cannot, there will obviously be idiots that will be like, oh, well, this is why, like, you can't put that load on a small guard. Let me tell you something. You ask any fucking player to have a 38, 39, 40 usage, whatever the fuck it was in the playoffs, not just the playoffs, from basically the end of January onwards, they're going to run out of gas, dude. Like, Michael Jordan didn't win championships until he reduced his usage. Like, there's a reason for that. It is not possible or sustainable to ask a player to carry that for full seasons at a time. It's ridiculous. And I'm not blaming Tibbs because that was kind of the hand he got dealt. The moment Randle went down, they didn't have anybody else that could consistently create a shot. And maybe if OG was healthy for the whole time, maybe that load he's carrying isn't necessarily as much, especially in the regular season. But that's not what happened. So it doesn't matter what we think. That's what we know. Doesn't matter what I believe, Joe. It matters what I can prove. But yeah, it's just so I think like, and that this is why this conversation is tricky, because it's easy to be like, well, I don't love Julius's game. I don't think that game works. It's like it's easier to find a better fitting piece at his spot that kind of optimizes everything versus finding a stretch five, right? It's easier to find that. Okay, fine. I'll give you that, right? Okay, it's easier to find somebody who's going to get up the requisite 3-point volume and give you the complementary skills and maybe gives you another guy you can throw a point of attack, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I'll give you that. But I don't really believe that it's easy to find somebody who does those things and gives you the shot creation that you need to alleviate the burden on Brunson. Hey, like did Brunson ever get possessions? And again, our pal DJ Ace Zulo over at Knicks Film School pointed this out painstakingly, and much to my annoyance, because I did not want to keep seeing it, DJ, was how Brunson's catch and shoot 3-point volume, spot up 3-point volume, just became minuscule after Randle got hurt. It just didn't exist. Everything was pull up threes for him. That's all the threes he got. And the point is, like, you want somebody who can allow Brunson to get off the ball, and not just because he's a sniper, but also so he can just rest a little bit, so he doesn't have to create everything, not just for himself, for the team. And can you find that player to then replace Julius Randle, who also gives you, who also maintains integrity on the defensive glass, where the Knicks dropped significantly in the back half of the season after Randle went out, and we saw them struggle with it during the playoffs, especially in the Pacers series. It's not just replacing the shot creation, it's the defensive rebounding. It is, does he give you the upside on the, we talked about point of attack defense, but just in defensive versatility, does he do that? And the other question you need to really wonder and consider, and this is critical, is OG somebody who you're comfortable with playing mostly as a predominant four? Is that something he's comfortable with? Is that something that you can put on his body? And if you are going to put him as a starting four, is this a guy that you need to really, I think this is very obvious at this point. This is a guy you need to manage his minutes much more carefully than you need to do with Julius Randle, which means getting an actual backup four or somebody who can, coast play there better and it's a meaningful thing. Josh Hart can do it, but I think we saw it takes a toll on Josh Hart too. And I don't know if you want to keep doing that as he gets into his late 20s and moves into his 30s. So maybe you want somebody with a little bit more size there as a backup too. So it makes that part something to consider as well. There's a lot of moving variables. There's a lot of variables to these decisions. And, think about it. We started talking about Donte and look at where we are now. All this stuff is tied together. There's no way to separate it out, right? This is it's an equation. It's not just this has X numeric value and that's it. No, it's an equation that you're trying to solve to create a balanced formula. And it's very tough. And then it's not just that it's tough. It's easy to be well, man, I would swap out Julius Randle for Jason Tatum. Yeah, sure. You know what sucks? You're not going to get Jason Tatum. The guys that you're well, I would swap Randle out for this person, they're probably not going to be available. You're probably not going to get them. And that's why I think a guy like Paul George is very interesting. Because yes, he's older. He's not what he once was at his peak. He's still really fucking good. And yes, he's also up for a new contract this summer. It'll be a very significant contract. He has interest from Philadelphia, apparently. The Clippers also want to keep him. So he is a market. But like if you're going to move out Randle, I don't know that there's a better option available this summer than I don't know. I flat out will say there's not a better option available for the things that you need: shot creation, defensive versatility, etc., playmaking ability to create offense.
Do you think Durant would be available, and would you still prefer Paul George to Durant?
What do you think?
Well, I know you hate KD, person, but I do think KD is a better player than Paul George at this point in his career, and always was.
I'm good on Kevin Durant. I'm
Wow.
always going to.
You would rather trade for Paul George than Kevin Durant?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
I have zero interest in getting in the Kevin Durant business. He's a miserable fuck who has no friends, and every team he goes to instantly has become a disaster over the last couple of years. His last two franchises, and I mean, fuck all that. Like by the time he was done in Golden State, they were miserable. That entire team was miserable.
Like that's because of him, or because they have a nut kicking?
I think it's I think it's because of him. I 100% believe it's because of him. Like I think he is miserable. He's a miserable person. He's a miserable person. That's what I think. This is not even me shitting on Kevin Durant. I genuinely believe he's an unhappy person. And I think that unhappiness seeps into, because he is a great player. And if you get Kevin Durant, guess what? He's going to be front and center of your organization. You're going to have to cater to him to try and optimize him to make him happy and give him what he wants. And guess what? He's an unhappy. He's like the Livia Soprano of the fucking NBA. That's what he is. He's like the Livia Soprano of the NBA. The guy's never fucking happy. He goes to Golden State. Well, I don't like this that much.
I wish the Lord would take me now.
Oh, look at him. Poor you. But like that's what he is. He's just miserable about everything all the time. Like I'm out of, like, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm sorry. Like if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So be it. I would much rather have Paul George. Also, I think this is what I think. You have Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson, to me, has proven himself and has established himself as a viable number one option on a championship team. I believe that. I think if you go out and bring in Kevin Durant, there instantly becomes friction there. It's not necessarily because they're going to hate each other, but I think there's always going to be a friction there because how do you balance that? How do you, like, Steph did it, and even with Steph, there was like some clunkiness. It wasn't always beautiful and great and awesome. And if you watch how they evolved during the time Kevin Durant was with the Warriors, they became way more ISO heavy than they've ever been, because that's Kevin Durant. Like at the end of the day, he's an ISO scorer. And that would be fine in New York because we love our ISOs here. But I just think there'll be a natural friction there that exists. And that will not exist with Paul George, who has openly talked about how he's a number two and he's completely fine with that. And he embraces that. Like, he wants to be a supporting star. He doesn't want to be the man. He doesn't want to be the man.
There will be friction because his podcast is a direct competitor with the Roommate Spot, and
it's not much of a competition. The podcast P clears the roommates, unfortunately. I just think he's I think he's kind of the perfect fit, man. I do. And I get the risk. Like,
you're adding another injury prone guy.
Yeah. He's older and he's older. So anybody that is out on that idea, I'm not, like, I don't think, to me, like if the Knicks go into this offseason and they come out of it and they're like, you know what? Like, if they come to it, like, we would never know this, right? But if they basically are at a point where it's like, all right, we can get Paul George, but Julius Randle has to go out, or we can keep Randle, but we can't get Paul George. If that is the decision they're facing, if they were like, you know what? Sometimes you gotta dance with the one that brung you. Like, if they choose to stick with Randle, I don't think that's a crazy decision. I wouldn't kill them for that. Maybe it'll be wrong. Maybe it'll be right. I don't know. But like if it's wrong, I don't think that necessarily makes it a stupid decision because there's a lot of risk with Paul George. And I understand that risk. And on top of that, now we've already got OG, who we know is a significant risk. Now you're kind of you're increasing your level of risk by getting somebody like Paul George in terms of injuries.
And we see that one injury kind of cascades, right? Because other players have to play more minutes. That's exactly what happened with the Knicks this year, right? So.
You're right. And I will say also, like, if you get Paul George, he's awesome. I think that you need to get like a true backup 4 at that point, because I don't want Paul George playing a shit. Like he can play the 4. I know that a lot of his minutes have been logged at the 4. But if you look at the lineups he's playing the 4 in, it's kind of like, is he the 4, or is like Kawhi the 4, or is like Amir Coffey the 4, or is Marquise or whatever fucking Marcus Morris the 4, who they had for a while. Like, who is actually the 4 in those lineups? Like the Knicks definitely would need to get at least somebody who, like, I mean, actually, he played really well last night. I don't know if you watched the game, but like maybe you just like go sign O'Shea Brissett, and you're like, hey, you're the backup 4 now for us. Like, you're gonna play. I don't know, but you need to get another body, I think, then too. With Julius, if you re-sign Julius, I don't think you need to do anything at the 4. You're fine. You're fucking beautiful there. Julius will get his fucking 34 minutes and 35 minutes a game. OG can take a bunch of those backup minutes. Hart can take a bunch of those backup minutes, and you're good to go. You don't need to worry about that. I think if you get if you replace Randle with Paul George, that's a little bit different, and that's something that you'll need to manage.
You're playing OG full time at the 4 at that point, and then Hart probably.
And you might not even want to, right? Like you might want to be like, okay, you're going to start at the 4, but we want to get somebody that allows you to play some at the 3 as well. So it's a different thing you're looking at. Whereas if you just keep Randle, you don't need to worry about that at all. Literally not at all.
Yeah, it's going to create some issues there for sure. I do think, if they were to make a Donovan Mitchell trade, I think Randle's going, but I do think that's also problematic because you ideally you would trade him at that point for a couple of high level role players at least, or at least one, a Mikal Bridges level player maybe, right? And picks, but I don't think this would ever happen, but Jaden McDaniels, I don't think Minnesota's going to trade him, but that type of player, right? Those types of players are tough to find. And we've talked a lot about, at the time of the OG trade, it was, a lot of people were like, well, the Knicks give up a lot, right? They gave up RJ, they gave up IQ, they gave up virtually a first round pick with that Detroit second. But there's a reason, right? And it's that archetype, which we're now trying to find again, the kind of high level wing with elite size. It's tough. Those guys don't end up on the market much, there's a reason why, when you have that physical ability and you can defend, there's a reason why a guy like Tobias Harris got that contract. There's a reason why these guys, even when they're not great basketball players, end up getting a lot of money. Do you think there's, I think that it's tricky in that sense too. My guess is I think I think they're going to continue to, unless a star trade. I don't think they would trade Randle for Paul George for the reasons that we discussed. I do think Paul George is a very interesting fit here. I think they kick the tires on like Donovan Mitchell, but ultimately I don't think that star trade is out there this summer. I don't think Brooklyn is going to trade Mikal Bridges. So then at that point, you're looking, how can we get better on the margins? I think to your point, another high-level point of attack defender with versatility would help a lot. And I know you've been talking up Caruso a lot for a while. I think earlier you had said, you'd even be willing to include Deuce. I think we disagreed on that.
For what it's worth, I wouldn't do that now after the playoffs. And I also don't think you'd need to. Like they signed Kobe White to an extension last year. He still got 2 years, $22 million left on that. And then they also extended. Yeah, and they also extended my good pal Ayo Dosunmu last year too. So like I'm not really sure that they'd be like, well, if we can get Deuce back, awesome. Like I think if you're going to get Caruso and if they want to trade Caruso, I think you're trading picks.
Cool. Would you rather trade for Caruso or DeMar DeRozan? Because we all know we want that scoring from mid range, right?
I don't think this is. I don't know if you're seriously asking me.
It's crazy how those reports have popped up. But
every offseason, every trade deadline, DeMar DeRozan's on the cusp of being a New York Knick.
yeah,
Him and fucking like Andre Drummond.
who I actually wouldn't mind if we needed to get another like a third big, like not a vet man, obviously. I mean, it seems like to me like Caruso makes a ton of sense. I don't know who you're swapping out of the rotation at that point. It doesn't solve the backup four issue. But you know, if we had him in that Indiana series, even with a million injuries, probably winning that. You know, it allows you, he can play the four a little bit, right? Maybe in some lineups. You can get more shooting out there, you know, if Randle's on the bench around him, right? You can probably just take a lot of, you know, we talked about Donte at point of attack, but you have to remember, like you said, he was only playing 25 minutes a game during that stretch, right? Now when he's playing 40, the defense is going to take a hit. It took a hit I mean, Hart was terrible in that Indiana series on defense, right? Deuce was bad too. So longer minutes are going to take a toll there, every game. But we're talking a little bit about Caruso, but that's the kind of move I see them making. Just because I think Paul George, they haven't shown the appetite for that level of risk, where they would trade, you know, a guy who's generally been pretty sturdy for them in Randle, and for an aging, they haven't really traded for assets for aging players like that, right? I mean, Grimes for Bogey and Burks, at that point, Grimes' value is pretty low. So.
Yeah, I mean, the more I just kind of look at this team and the options they have this offseason, I just really feel strongly like bolstering your bench that's where you can probably most easily upgrade this offseason. The Knicks had one of the worst scoring benches after the OG trade. Deuce obviously I think he made a leap towards the end of the season. I thought his playoffs were really good. And I know he struggled at times in the Pacers series, but what I saw from him offensively, feel a lot better about where he's headed going into next season. Do I think that he is a quality creator off the bench? Probably not, but I'm not totally dismissing it because I did see stuff in the playoffs with him off the bounce that I was very impressed by. But like aside from Deuce, your bench is Burks, who closed the season in his final appearances in the playoffs with in just a huge fucking burst at the end of the season. You have Bogdanovich, who got surgery on his wrist and foot, I believe. He should be fine by the start of the season, but he's 35. Who knows how he looks after surgery? Is that something that you're comfortable with? And also, his contract is $19 million. So if the Knicks are worried about, hey, we're on the threshold here of crossing into the first apron, if we guarantee this, maybe you don't guarantee it. Maybe you just let him walk. I don't know. And then maybe you can use the mid-level to go get somebody. Who knows? I'm just throwing that as a possibility out there. Or maybe you use him as a trade chip to go get somebody. Whatever it is, that's kind of that's your bench. And Precious or Mitch, neither of those guys is offering any scoring punch, right? And that's not to say they're useless offensively, especially in Mitch's case. We know what he can do, but he's not giving you scoring, right? It's not like you can. We're not throwing the ball to Mitch and hey, dude, we need a bucket. Go get us something here, big guy. But I do think they can improve that. And I know people will be like, well, how does Caruso improve that? Look, he doesn't make them a better offensive team, obviously. Doesn't give you scoring punch off the bench, but he does make you a better team. He just does make you a better team because of what he can bring to the table. And so to me, he'd be one piece you bring in and you'd still want to go get somebody else. Is there somebody else you can get, or is it just bring back Bogdanovich, see how he looks? I don't know. I don't.
There is also the possibility, and I do want to talk about this separately, but Deuce did improve quite a bit. I was actually, so this is a crazy small sample size, but he had 1.2 pick and roll attempts per game in the playoffs, which probably comes out to like 15 or something over the course of 15 or 20 over the course of playoffs. A very small sample, but he averaged 1.43 points per possession, which is the 98th percentile. And even during the regular season, I think he was above 50. I think he was at a very respectable 0.9 points per possession. Again, low volume is like 1.5 per game, but it's not nothing. I do think he's had some. He's really improved in a lot of areas. I think can he make another leap? I think is the biggest question. Or sorry, not the biggest question, but that is to your point, right? So many things are related in terms of decision making and what they think. But I think can he? If you just need a guy to take 8 minutes a game in the playoffs, obviously you saw Deuce struggle, but maybe some of those struggles were overblown, or maybe they should have gone to if on low volume if he was that effective in pick and roll. Now getting to those pick and rolls themselves was tough because he's still not great at handling ball pressure. He's very right hand dominant. But if there's more where he can just be a capable backup point guard, he's a dangerous player on offense. He has that pull up mid range game. He's very aggressive taking the 3-point shot. He's a pretty underrated athlete. When he gets to the rim, he's shown the ability to get up there and throw down some dunks. So the question I'll ask you is Caruso doesn't solve your playmaking problem, but one, you get Randle back to potentially lead the bench. Do you think Deuce can get there? Because good pick and roll numbers. It's really, I think you mentioned this. He's just really right hand dominant, but it seems like the other skills are there to at least manage 8 minutes a game when Brunson sits in the playoffs.
He could get there. I won't dismiss that. I did think he showed significant growth. But you're really good. The Knicks are really good. And it is a risk to be like, well, we think Deuce is going to take this next step. So we're comfortable betting on that. But we've seen them take those chances before and betting on internal development. Is that something they're still like comfortable doing given where they are and how good they are? I don't know. I will say, I think it's funny because I remember through the season when Deuce first got into the rotation, every time they'd be on a broadcast, somebody would be like, oh, like Tibbs let us know how much he believes in Deuce McBride. And I'd be like, oh, wow, he believes in him so much. He played him fucking 9 minutes tonight. Great. But I think we did see as the season progressed and towards the end, like he does believe in Deuce McBride and he does like Deuce McBride. He's willing to lean into his ability to play with Brunson, off of Brunson, which is a positive. So he has a supporter in Tom Thibodeau. If Tibbs believes in him, then you can get away with it. Like you then have that option. I think it's a little trickier if Tibbs is more of the opinion of like, hey, I like Deuce, but Deuce is what he is. He can create sometimes, but he's not somebody I want to bank on as a creator. He's a good defender who's a knockdown 3-point shooter. It's great. It's a nice piece. It's fucking got him on a great contract for that skill set. But that's what his skill set is. It's not anything beyond that. And again, like we saw once they traded RJ and Quick, even before the injuries hit, that they were very, very reliant on Brunson and Randle to create the offense for everybody. And maybe OG would have gotten more comfortable and taken on more of a tertiary creation load than he was, but we don't know for sure. So it's a tough thing to know? Like, is that something that you can do, or do they need to go get what he? It's like I'm just throwing out a name, not saying this is the guy they should get, but like, should they go get like fucking Colin Sexton, right, or Jordan Clarkson, or one of these bench guards that can score, and not maybe to not necessarily to in sending Deuce out, but to play off the bench with Deuce. Like maybe that's something you do. I don't know. Like I just it's very very hard to say.
I mean, I do think if you add a guy like Caruso to that bench, can you have a ball handler by committee with him and Brunson? That's one question. Two, the defense would be, or not Brunson, sorry, McBride. The defense would be big time, right? If you have Hart, McBride, Caruso coming off the bench, you probably have Randle with that, and Mitch, right? That's 4 high level defenders. When healthy, Mitch and Caruso are both kind of all defense level defenders. I thought Mitch was playing at an all defense level before he got hurt this year. Obviously, the return wasn't as good, but clearly never quite got to 100%. Although I think he had some good moments against Philly.
For what it's worth, Caruso in his minutes. Sorry, keep going. I fucked up. Actually, I'll get it right now. Caruso in minutes where he played on the floor without DeRozan or Kobe White this year, only 136 minutes, but the offense was 103.52 net rating. I mean, this Chicago team is so weird. I don't know what to make of all of that. For what it's worth, him with Kobe White and him with DeRozan were positive combinations. So, like, the point guard by committee thing, maybe that can work, because I wouldn't say that DeRozan is a point guard, even though he can facilitate offense. And Kobe White is a developing point guard, but I wouldn't say he was one that you're like super all the way in bought in on as good as he played this year. But yeah, like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought that was worth bringing up.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it can. I do think McBride. And to your point with how close they are, can you just like bet on Deuce getting better and not make any other moves? I don't know, but I do think that like a guy who can just give you 8 minutes, off the bench is just some kind of as like a solid, I don't know if that's like a Kyle Lowry type or whatever, or just a decent backup who can just, kind of steer the autopilot for the bench. You can get that at the trade deadline. So if they go into next year with the hope or the belief that Deuce is going to get there, then I don't think you really need to make another big move, right? And if you end up saying, well, all right, let's get a Colin Sexton, like or a Clarkson, or even a Bruce Brown, right? You can still do that at the trade deadline without spending a ton, and probably not costing yourself that much flexibility, in the short term. I don't think this is really a big regular season problem. It's really a playoff problem. And you have other options too. Rokas Jokubaitis is a guy that's interesting that, Prez has talked about. He doesn't get a ton of minutes in Europe, but his game is very pick and roll focused. They don't run as many in Europe. They also tend to not play younger players as much. But he's a guy who's shown the ability to, in the second best league in the world, start and run the point guard position at a pretty high level, solid size. You can play him probably a little bit next to Deuce and next to Brunson. You can try those things. I think that should be looked at separate from Caruso, because whoever that non-Brunson option is, having more ball. Like, I'll say this: like, Caruso isn't a guy you can just throw to and have him run a pick and roll. Like, that's not what he's going to do all the time. But he's a smart decision maker. That was something that, even with guys like DiVincenzo, it's when him or Hart would make a turnover, it really stuck out, because for the most part, we haven't had this many guys who can act in dynamic situations on the Knicks. The Knicks actually, on offense, Brunson gets the ball out of his hands in a trap. Devo and Hart generally made the right calls. They could generally attack closeouts and play in these kind of situations. So you're adding another guy like that at Caruso. Let's be real. He's not a high volume 3-point shooter, and he's not some, drive king. But, whether it's traps, whether it's screening, whether it's making quick decisions with the ball, he's shown that ability. You're adding another guy like that, which, frankly, you're always going to need in the playoffs. But I just think for that backup point guard thing, you have options. I don't think you need to make that a move yet, especially if you're keeping Randle, because the hope is obviously going to be Randle can carry that bench no matter who the backup point guard is. At that point, you don't really need a guy that dynamic. And then if it's not Randle, then frankly, you're probably trading for a star, right? And then the backup point guard position doesn't become as important either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point guard by committee thing doesn't work when you're talking about like a starting lineup. I do think it works better when you're talking about bench units. And like, yeah, I think it's, you can generally go out and find a bench guard to facilitate offense better somewhere around the trade deadline more. And so like, again, the Knicks don't need to fix everything with their roster that is lacking in the offseason. Like, they don't have to do it all in the next 4 fucking months, right? Like, they have time until at least the 2025 trade deadline to slowly kind of add pieces, figure out what they need, all that type of stuff, which they've done previously. And they did really well this year, right? They didn't make a big move last offseason. They just signed Donte, traded Obi, and that was basically it. That was their moves for the offseason. And then obviously in season, they were like, all right, now this thing is available at the price we want it at. Cool, let's pull the trigger. Okay, Grimes is miserable. We still need to get some scoring pop off the bench. Let's do this thing. Like they can make these moves in season as well. So to me, like, I don't know. If you can get Caruso this offseason, or look, it doesn't need to be Caruso. I think if you can get a defensively versatile bench piece that can help you a point of attack, that can, guard up and down a bit on the wing, like just bring that piece in. And then, maybe you want to give Deuce the chance. You want to at least see, hey, like he improved so much this past season once he got the opportunity to really play consistently, and not just play consistently, but even be on the ball consistently. Maybe you're comfortable making that risk, and you want to see it. Hey, we like Bogey. We got Bogey for a reason. We didn't get to see him in the specific role and in the spots in the lineup, so we wanted to see him in because Randle got hurt and OG got hurt, and they just didn't get to play all together that much. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that's a very okay way to look at things. But they're not, I don't want to say they're in a precarious position. They're not in a precarious position, but they're in a position where they're really good. So, and Brunson's awesome. Brunson's a superstar in his prime. So you've got to kind of be willing to be aggressive when moves are there to be made that you feel increase your chances of winning a championship. I don't know what those moves are. They might disagree, right? They might be like Caruso can't shoot, or Caruso is a nothing offensive player, so that's not something that we care for right now. Fine, but you've got to be aggressive about what you want within reason. Obviously, you don't just, oh my god, we want. No, it's like, I'm not advocating the Knicks start trading like 4 firsts for Alex Caruso. That would be insane. But aggressive within reason, yeah, they need to be. They need to be now. You're on mute, Stacy.
They're always looking for ways to get this front office has always been looking for ways to get better. They're never going to be complacent. And and to your point, Philly does have cap space, right? And they'll be healthier next year. So we talk about those 4 teams that maybe you say, can the Knicks compete with them? But you're looking at we don't know what's going to happen with Cleveland, but there's a scenario where this Darius Garland trade, or they extend Mitchell, trade Darius Garland for actually pieces that fit better on Mitchell, or Mobley. They're not going to trade Mobley, but they trade Allen for something useful, right? And maybe they have better. Philly, they could get Paul George. They could add LeBron. Who knows with that cap space what they're going to do. So you cannot, if you don't get better, you get you fall behind. So they are going to make a move. They're going to have to be aggressive. I think partly, and we can talk about this. There have been reports that Jalen Brunson would be willing to take what can conservatively be described as likely a pay cut by extending instead of waiting to get a much bigger bag next year. And he might just want to lock in that money rather than risk what can happen, right? We saw it happen to Isaiah Thomas. I think Brunson's a better player, but particularly for smaller guards, that there can be some risk, right? But this is the last off season. It seems like they'll have that flexibility, given they have to pay Hartenstein, they have to pay OG, and Brunson and Randle will both be on some kind of new contract next year. So that lends to so I think all of those things say they're going to do something. What I'm very interested in, what I'm curious about, is how much of that is getting better on the margins, even if it's a significant move, like not adding a star high usage guy, right? But a Caruso, or they're not going to get Mikal Bridges, but a high level role player like that, right? I think you mentioned Amir Coffey, potentially. Those are the kind of guys. I think it will look more like that because I just don't see the big piece that's out there. Besides maybe a guy like Paul George. Like, I don't think Booker is getting traded. I'm probably more open to the Durant idea than you are, just because I think an offense with Durant and Brunson is pretty fucking insane. But that's been kind of their MO.
If you're worried about 3-point volume now, worry about it even more with Kevin Durant, who shot 12 threes in 4 playoff games, which is less than Josh Hart made in the first round.
Yeah, but he can shoot. And you'd still have DiVincenzo. His 3-point volume is still higher than Randle's. But I just don't see them making that move. I think they want to stay young. I think they have a good relationship with Randle. I think he has a good relationship with the locker room. And they've believed in him, and he's rewarded their faith. We talk about kind of the playoff struggles, but he's improved at a bunch of other skills, right? He's improved as a decision maker. It's still not great, but he improved on that certainly from his first year and his second year. He improved his 3-point shooting where, this year wasn't great, but last year was at 34% on really high volume. Like, he's capable. He's improved his shot selection every year, right? From kind of just having to do his LeBron impression in his first year, then going to, then having some struggles. Even that bad year, he had started to push more out into that donut distribution. He was taking fewer mid-range shots. The year after, he, ramps up the 3-point volume. And then this year, it's mostly been just everything close to the hoop. So he's improved on those things. I wouldn't say he's improved too much as a defender, but this is a guy that gets in the gym, like, has the work ethic that you associate with this team. Maybe playoff basketball isn't a skill that's beyond him either. I don't see a big move because I just don't know that it's there. I would assume you're not in favor of like a sign and trade for LeBron James, right? So actually, I am curious to that because if you're willing to push it in for George, LeBron is older, but actually played more games, I think, than Paul George.
Fuck LeBron. I'm not interested in LeBron James. I'm sorry.
From a basketball standpoint,
I don't want LeBron James from any standpoint.
But you could see the fit, right?
No, I couldn't see the fit.
You see it with PG, but not with LeBron?
No, because PG's not going to come here and ask for the entire fucking team to be traded for the first half of the year.
Okay.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, you can't establish a culture and then be like, well, let's bring in somebody who's entirely antithetical to that culture and be cool with that. I think it's ridiculous. Like, it worked for the Lakers because they had no fucking culture. They brought LeBron in, and he was like, with the expectation from him that he was like, so you guys are going to like trade for AD at some point, right? We're going to make that happen. Awesome. Like, no, I have zero fucking interest in LeBron. He is 40 years old. He's going to come in, immediately demand we start making moves to prioritize his short term.
Demand that we draft his kid.
I'm sure he would. Why wouldn't he? I would if I were him. If I had the like leverage, I would 100%. But like, he's going to come in. He's going to immediately demand we trade half the fucking guys on the team for guys that he wants. He's going to constantly whine. When we win, it'll be all about LeBron James. When we lose, It'll be about, oh, this guy didn't do that thing, that guy didn't do this thing. Like that is the opposite of the culture the Knicks have built. They've not done that. They have not thrown people under the bus. They have not, had leaks. I mean, that's the other thing that comes to LeBron. You get LeBron, you're going to have 50,000 leaks every fucking week about X, Y, the coach, this guy, that guy, who should get traded, who they want. All that's all part of the LeBron circus. And you know what? When he was 35 even, it was worth it because he was that good. He's not worth it anymore. I'm sorry. You can throw the fucking numbers all you want. He is not worth it anymore. And if he was worth it, then the Lakers wouldn't be a fucking play-in team every year. Pretty simple. Pretty fucking simple to me. And they're fucking second-class citizens in the West now. That's LeBron James's team. Like, okay. Good for him.
I will say the idea of him potentially signing in a place like Philadelphia just took us to 6 games, but it's a tough series isn't particularly encouraging. I probably would say, look, the guy did win 4 championships. I don't think we're talking about a KD type situation. And he would be coming here in the situation where...
What have you done for me lately?
He would be coming here in a situation where he's joining on Brunson's team. Would he see it maybe as his own? Sure.
He's never going to see it as Brunson's team, man. Be realistic. It's LeBron James.
It's different from the LA situation.
It's not. Right? He went to fucking Miami. He joined Dwayne Wade, and it was LeBron's team.
That was a way different part of his career. My point is,
but it was also Dwayne fucking Wade who'd already won a championship with the Miami Heat, and he went there, LeBron, and it was his team.
I'm talking about LeBron coming in and trading 5,000 guys.
Right? That is what's going to happen. It happens everywhere he goes.
He didn't do that in Miami, though.
Yes, he did. He went there. He bitched until it didn't happen in Miami, and that's part of the reason why he left. Because he went to Pat Riley, wanted to get fucking Eric Spoelstra fired, and Riley was like, "Get the fuck out of my office." Like, oh, I need to have Maverick Carter and Rich Paul on the fucking team plane. And Riley was like, "Fuck Maverick Carter and fuck Rich Paul. They're not flying on the fucking team plane." And he left. If he comes, you have to cater to him and all that entails. And he's going to get guys traded. You're going to get leaks. You're going to get this. You're going to have bitching about the coaching and that thing. It's all LeBron all the time. And that was worth it. It was worth it. If we're talking about 35-year-old LeBron James, I would say, fuck it. Let's go for it. But it's not. It is not. It is 40-year-old LeBron James. This guy has been in the play-in 3 years in a row. His team's been in the fucking play-in 3 years in a row. I'm sorry. Like, you can tell me, oh, well, they're supporting cast this and that thing, that. Okay, but if he's a guy that's in the play-in 3 years in a row who plays with Anthony Davis, and whatever the fuck you think about Anthony Davis, he's pretty good at basketball. Okay? Like, that team has been in the play-in 3 years in a row. Congrats on making a Western Conference Finals. So did the Miami Heat made a fucking finals last year. Do I think the Miami Heat were like some juggernaut team and that should make, we should now trade for Jimmy Butler a year removed from that? No. Like, LeBron is amazing. He's the second best player ever. He's still really good. I want nothing to do with that. I want nothing to do with that circus. I want nothing to do with accommodating him and massaging his ego and all those things. I don't want anything to do with that. I'm sorry. Like, I have zero desire to deal with that. I completely reject the idea he's going to come in and be like, well, it's Brunson's team, guys. Like, he might say it. I'll never believe it. And I guarantee you within 2 months, you'll be right there with me like, oh my God, he clearly does not think this is Brunson's team. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It has never happened in his career. And at least if you want to say what happened in Miami, fine. It has never happened since then. It has never happened since then. Did not happen in Cleveland. Has not happened over years in LA. That's the last 10 years of his career, right?
Well, there wasn't anyone else on that talent level. I mean, AD is not that level of offensive talent.
Okay, but if you don't think Brunson is viewed now the way Kyrie was viewed then, you're delusional.
You think Kyrie was viewed as a top 5 player?
He was viewed as like he was viewed as like this guy could be an MVP candidate one day. That's what he was being talked about.
Yeah, one day. Like,
yeah, but that's the type of talent he is. And then Anthony Davis was 100% seen like that. Anthony Davis was seen as like, but he was seen as like this. Oh my God, Anthony Davis in his prime. This is like an MVP caliber type of player. You got to remember, like his the year before he got traded to LA, the Pelicans, not his last year in New Orleans, the year before that, they went to the second round of the playoffs. That team was not very good, and they were fucking. I mean, they murdered the Blazers in the first round, and yes, they got waxed in the second round. They got waxed by who? Like the fucking Warriors, who were amazing. Like Anthony Davis was viewed very much as like the chess piece type of like if you go back and look at it then, if the Knicks got that first overall pick, the Zion pick, they're 100% trading that for AD. That's 100% what was going to happen. They're going to trade that for AD, and I to this day I think if they get the first pick, they get KD, they get Kyrie, and they get AD, and that would have been the team. Like I'm just so positive of that. But like that, he was viewed as like the Celtics were trying to get him. He was viewed as like the kind of big piece to move the needle, and that's what he was when he came to the Lakers. And LeBron and him, obviously, I still think they play really well together, but it ain't AD's team. I mean, they can leak whatever they want. Oh yeah, this coach, we're hiring him more for AD than LeBron. LeBron doesn't have anything to do with this coaching search. Do you fucking believe that? Do you believe that for 5 seconds? Like, come on. Like, we know what LeBron is going to do.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah, we know what LeBron is going to do because he's done it over the course of his entire career. And you know what? More power to him. He's earned the power that he's wielded because he's been that fucking good. He's been so good that the Cavs and the Lakers at various points have allowed him to just run the team more or less in the background, in the shadows. And great. Like he's earned that. He earned that. But you know what? He's not that guy anymore. I do not want to deal with that. That's me. I can't speak for anybody else. Obviously, LeBron James is, again, I think he's the second best player of all time. He is still probably like a top 10-ish type of guy. But I don't particularly feel like I'm personally against. I think this is what I think. I think you cannot look at what the Knicks have established as a culture, how they've established it, the way they've gone about things, and immediately cast that stuff aside or overlook it or undervalue it when a player with the caliber of LeBron James or Kevin Durant, even those guys, when they become available, especially at their ages, and especially given their recent track record. Like, I mean, at least LeBron made a Western Conference Finals. Kevin Durant has won 2 playoff series in the last 5 years, and he's not advanced past the second round. Like, what? If there's proof of like, oh, he can elevate a team, even if you trade out a bunch of value for him, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any fucking ounce of that to be proven. I don't know. Doesn't look like it to me. LeBron, a little bit more of a nebulous case, but he's going to be worth however much. He's going to get his money. Like LeBron's getting his money, right? Even if he does like all right, I'll opt into my player option. You guys trade for me, and we'll figure it out. Like you're talking about minimum Julius Randle, Bogdanovich. I think that at least is enough money to get that done. You're gonna, what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna 100% have to trade Mitchell Robinson. You're gonna have to start getting fives who can space the floor. Because if you have LeBron, you need to maximize him. There's other transaction costs that come with getting LeBron that you have to take on and incur and utilize. Maybe that's worth it. And obviously, look, if you trade, it's not just gonna be Randle and Bogdanovich, right? You're gonna have to trade out a couple picks for him as well. LeBron James at 40 years old, we're turning out future assets for him. Like I'm so not into that idea at all. I'm sorry. Like,
I mean, if you believe in Brunson though, like Brunson and LeBron is
I can believe in Jalen Brunson come hell or high
especially
water.
when you look at kind of putting him with a passer like that, right? Because it unlock him a lot of ball. Look, I get kind of the circus that comes with LeBron. The point I was actually making before that was the guys who they could get, whether it's LeBron, Paul George, KD, even a guy like Jimmy Butler. I don't think that would ever happen because I don't see Pat Riley really trading with the Knicks. I just think it's more likely they continue to improve on the margins. Maybe get a guy like Caruso, although it still sounds like Chicago's asking price is pretty exorbitant. But that's what I was saying. That I think the star trade unless I mean I'm starting to believe Mitchell's going to resign. I don't think Booker they don't Booker doesn't have the leverage to really force that trade even if KD goes out. So I think that they're going to say run it back and continue to add depth and guys who defend and fit the culture. And I think they will bring Lucas Jokic over. I think they'll look at solving that point guard issue as maybe Jokic fits, maybe Randle is enough as the bench leader. Maybe you got a guy like Caruso and you have point guard by committee, but I don't think they're going to go for a guy like Clarkson just to play that backup point guard role. Maybe Deuce just improves on his own again. Those I don't think they're going to panic just for the non-Brunson minutes yet. And if they do make a big move for that, it won't be, I think, a Jordan Clarkson. I think at that point they'd probably say, look, Randle can't handle carrying the bench. In that case, we need a real number 2 option. And they'll probably make a move at that. But I don't think that's going to happen yet.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I cannot. I'm not interested in getting into the LeBron business or the fucking clutch business right now. I just sick of them. I'm really. It's fun watching the Lakers circus from afar. I'll put it that way. I don't want to bring the circus into town. PT and Barnum is gone. Let's keep them out of here. What do you make of? I mean, I don't know. Did you make anything of the report that the OG Anunoby? There was rumors at the combine that he's not such a done deal the way Pascal Siakam back to Indiana is, or did you just take that as like negotiating leverage bullshit slop that we just get to hear at this time of the year?
Well, I think with isn't Siakam either he's not RFA, but there was a reason why beyond just like vibes why people think it's a done deal, right? Which I forget what that reason was, but no, I think it's the fact is OG is a free agent, and other teams have cap space. I mean, I don't think the Knicks would have made that trade if they didn't think he was going to resign. But I think for speculation, it's not like crazy speculation to think that other teams are going to try. His agent is Leon Rose's son. I don't think that they trade quickly and RJ for a rental. I think that would be by far the worst move of the Leon Rose era. By far, it would be a disaster. And this just isn't a front office that has been caught with its pants down like that. And I don't think that's gonna. And you can tell OG likes being here. Try to give it a go even with an injury in the playoffs. So do I think that report was just baseless? I think it probably heard from other teams that other teams believe they have a shot. Sure, everyone believes they have a shot. At the end of the day, I don't think that. It just seems very unlikely to me that the Knicks would let it get to that point. They'll pay him what he wants, and he wants to be here. So,
yeah, I don't think they have an option. It's like you can. At the end of the day, like if OG's like, I have a fucking max offer somewhere else, and I'm gonna go unless you give me 5 years, 200 million or whatever the fuck it is that he wants, or 5-year full max. Like, guess what? You're shit out of luck. Like, you just got to do it. There's no way to replace him. Even if he walks, you don't get cap space. Like, it's what it is. They have to keep him. So I don't really take much on it because the Knicks traded for him at a cost that, people might not feel it's that significant for a player as good as he is, but it was significant to me. And like they clearly acquired him with the intention of keeping him long-term. This was not just a rental, right? So it is what it is. I'm not too worried about it. I kind of think it's more bullshit than anything. And I think there's a variety of reasons it could be out in the media. I mean, it could be even like, hey, Leon putting it out there to kind of, hey, you guys could totally chase OG. Maybe you want to waste time doing that instead of pursuing things that are actually possible. Or it could be OG putting it out there, right? Like I'll say this, like I think it's a little bit interesting that the report we got out of, hey, Brunson's going to take this extension. Look at this guy sacrificing for the team. What a fucking guy. And then this report coming out there, right? It could be OG being like, look, it's really cool that Brunson sacrificed for the team, and I'm very, very happy for him. I want my money. So
Bring
give me my money. Yeah, give me my money. That's what I want. And I don't begrudge him that. Like he played on an undervalued contract for the last 4 years, and undervalued, I want to say that very much in NBA terms, not in real human people terms. Because I would take a 4-year, $80 million contract and feel very good about it. But he's obviously worth more than that, and that's why he was coveted around the league. So the Knicks got him, and it's why they're going to pay him. I'm not too worried about that part of it at all. What did you make of Detroit? Our good pals in Detroit hiring a new head of basketball operations. They hired Trajan Langdon from
That isn't. Yeah, I remember watching Trajan Langdon growing up, Duke. First of all, shout out to friend of the pod, Seth Partnow, as Langdon is from Anchorage, Alaska. Just like Anchorage, man. It's an interesting move. Obviously coming from New Orleans. Reading into what that front office has done can take you down many different paths. Detroit needed to make a change. They got a guy who's very well respected across the league. So we'll see. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I just think it's interesting more because of the decisions. Like they obviously have a lot to do to to make that just like roster make sense. And I mean, they're a lot like where the Knicks were before they hired Leon, right? Like where it's like they're not fucked. They have some intriguing young pieces. They have cap space. Like they're not fucked, but they're fucked for now because their team makes no sense at all. What I'm more interested in is like, what does this mean for various guys on their team? Like, I don't know. Isaiah Stewart's an interesting piece. Talked about it briefly with Prez. If the Knicks are, if the Knicks do want to go get an option in the front court that can kind of give you a stretch 5 option, yeah, like he'd be an interesting piece. He's locked in on a contract, 4 years, $64 million. So maybe he becomes somebody that becomes available, right? Who knows? Like maybe they look at their team and they're like, you know what, Cade Cunningham isn't it, or Jaden Ivey's not it, or Jalen Duren's not it, or whatever. And those are pieces that become available. Would any of them be players the Knicks are interested in? I don't know, but I think it's interesting to think about kind of those type of domino effects.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaiah Stewart is probably the most likely. He's a 4 for 64, right? So he's not cheap. But he gives you kind of that 5 out look. I definitely think he feels like a Tibbs guy in terms of the intensity he plays with and the effort. Pretty good rebounder. A little bit wild. You'd want to bring that under control. But the other guys, I mean, look, the Knicks they are past the point where taking flyers. Maybe they'll come back to this, right? We saw the Lakers do this with Cam Reddish. Malik Monk. Maybe there is some value to taking a flyer on a young guy who hasn't clicked for yet, right? But in general, the way they're made up, getting a guy like Ivy or Duren, who aren't really contributors to winning basketball at this point, that's just not what the Knicks seem to be prioritizing. Like I still believe in Jaden Ivey's talent. I also think he just cannot play on this Knicks team with the way he defends. and the way his decision making is. He's an incredible talent. I still think if this was the Knicks a few years ago, he's exactly the kind of. I mean, they were targeting guys like that, right? Hazonia fifth pick overall, Moutier seventh pick overall, right? That Scott Perry, Noah Vonleh, right? They had targeted these guys who were talented, but close to second contract, or it hasn't kicked in yet, right? But maybe there's some untapped upside. To me, really, the only guys the Knicks are just not doing that right now. It's they're not in the business of rehabilitating players to get some value. That's just not. They're not in that mode as an organization. I think they want guys who can contribute to winning now. We can get reps now, and the only two players I think that fit that mold that you mentioned would be Cade or Isaiah Stewart. And I think Langdon should get fired immediately if he trades Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine I would imagine that's part of keeping, or like part of the job that you're getting is like, hey, we're invested in Cade Cunningham, so you can do whatever the fuck you want. Aside from that, like, you can't trade Cade Cunningham. We're keeping him. That would be that's just my assumption. I don't know whether that's true or not. The other big piece of NBA news that came out this week was that the Cavs, moving on from JB Bickerstaff, who was fired after the season, or sort of let go, however you want to put it. So they will be looking for a coach. What did you make of this? Were you surprised? Were you thinking this was what's going to happen? What do you think it means for their future?
You talking about Bickerstaff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's that surprising. I don't think much changed in terms of his coaching ability between this year and last year, but I don't think he did a good job against the Knicks last year. Do I think that losing with a short-handed team to a pretty damn good Boston team on its own is the reason to fire him? No. Do I think they are obviously trying to get this extension done with Mitchell? Does this help them with that? Maybe. Which, if Mitchell is in the business of firing coaches, maybe or getting coaches fired, maybe that is something you want to discuss if before making a trade if you're Leon Rose. But I mean, I don't think even a lot of Cleveland fans were the biggest fan of Bickerstaff as a coach. Didn't really have good adjustments last year. This year was shorthanded, so it's a little unfair. But if they feel like there's a guy out there, I think the biggest relevant point is, do they go after a guy like Johnny Bryant, right, who has a great relationship with Mitchell? You'd figure that was driving it, because relative to last year, it's not like Bickerstaff was worse. He just didn't get any better. I think, I forget who mentioned this, but there was someone who mentioned that, there's probably 4 or 5 truly impactful coaches who like transform a team, who can really elevate a team's chances. There's probably 4 or 5 coaches who are actively bad, right, who make you worse. And then the rest, probably, it really depends on roster construction and makeup, right? I do think Bickerstaff probably falls in that middle group. I don't think it's like he's a terrible coach or something. But he's certainly not in that top 4 or 5, and you're always at risk. And ultimately, I would imagine if Donovan Mitchell wanted him there, he would be there. So if you're a Knicks fan, you probably don't want them. You probably want to monitor that situation, because I would imagine they at least make a call to Johnny Bryant.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not too worried about that. I know that him and Mitchell have a very close relationship, but I don't know. I just feel like they're not going to go with the first-time head coach for the team they have. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. And I know that Mitchell has a relationship with him, obviously. They also haven't been together on a sideline now for 4 years. So who knows if that relationship is as strong as it was. Like, not because they hate each other or something, but there's obviously a difference between, if you work with somebody every day for 4 years versus not working with somebody every day for 4 years. There's going to just be it's a different relationship than it once was, especially professionally. I don't know. Yeah, my takeaway from this was that I think Mitchell's staying. I think he's signing that extension. I think they fired Bickerstaff as kind of like a, there was a lot of reporting, obviously, that Mitchell didn't like Bickerstaff. They didn't get along. So to me, this is more of like a, hey, see, we are listening to you. We're going to build this thing around you. We care about you. But they have a lot of work to do. Like they've got probably the biggest, or maybe not biggest, but busiest offseason in the NBA because, we got to see if Mitchell signs an extension or not. They obviously have to hire a new coach now. If Mitchell signs an extension, I think it's inevitable that they trade. There's already been reporting, right? If Mitchell stays, then Rich Paul is going to go to them and be like, well, you need to trade Darius Garland. Okay. Well, if you trade Darius Garland, you got to get guys that complement Donovan Mitchell. And then I think the final piece is Jared Allen. Like he does not, if they believe, and Mobley gave them reason to believe in the playoffs that he's ready to play the 5. And actually that's his best position, which isn't that shocking. It was always going to be his best position. Then you have to trade Jared Allen too. And you got to trade Jared Allen to get, again, pieces that fit around him, around Mitchell and Mobley. And I think their cap situation, they're pretty expensive. So like they've got a lot to manage here. They've got a lot to figure out. And I'm very, very curious to see how this all pans out for them because hiring a new coach, extending Donovan Mitchell, trading 2 core pieces to get back value that makes your team better. Like this is not easy stuff. This is difficult. This is tough. And I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they're able to make it all happen. And I'm also interested to see, is Mitchell worth this type of catering too? Because as good as he is, and I do think he's really good, he's definitely gotten better since he left Utah. There's a lot of like Carmelo-ness to all of everything they've done with him, where it's like, well, we're trading for this guy because he's such a high level of talent. We can't pass up on this opportunity. We're going to sink all of our future assets into getting this guy. Great. They get him. Doesn't really work initially at the level you want it to work at. And you got a first round exit. Probably would have been a first round exit in a lot of other scenarios. They got a good matchup against Orlando. And they, whatever, they get gentlemen swept in the second round. Not totally their fault. They played, they had injuries, whatever. And now it's like, well, we need to cater to this guy and we want to extend him. So we're catering to him and we're going to give him everything he wants. And is he really a guy that is worth all that? Should he command that? I don't know. I don't personally think so, but we'll see. He's also got the injury stuff that he's had knee issues now for a few years. Like he missed 27 games this year in the regular season. He also didn't close the playoffs. He missed the last 2 games of the playoffs. It's definitely something to keep in mind and monitor. Is that just an issue for this year, or is that a lingering thing? His play style, people talk about Brunson's play style, and it's like with small guards, they don't age well. Brunson doesn't play above the rim. Brunson isn't necessarily dependent on the type of explosiveness that Mitchell is dependent on. We know guards like that don't age well. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that moving forward.
What is Mitchell now? 28?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's had some injuries. He's been banged up. That is probably more concerning. I think the 3-point volume and the skill,
He'll be 28. He'll be 28 when the season starts. Next season starts. He turns 28 in September.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, do I think Brunson is better at this point? Yes. Do I think it's a very small gap? Yes. Do I think Mitchell can be the number 1 player on a championship team? Yes. I also think about Brunson. I don't really think that about any other guard. We'll see, what happens with John Morant. He might be able to get in that conversation. Oh, I'd have to throw Fox in there, but Fox isn't really that small. So, I do think like he's right there with Brunson. Would I take Brunson over him? Yeah, but and in terms of the Carmelo-ness, I see what you're saying in terms of how much they gave up to get him, and the fact that they probably weren't quite. They were a team that was improving. If you remember with Lowry marking him and all that, that was a team that beat the Knicks a couple times. They made the play-in before trading. I think there are parallels, right? Where that 2011 Knicks team, with Gallinari and Stoudemire for the first time was like somewhat respectable, and they skipped some steps straight to Melo. Did Cleveland skip those steps, even though maybe they should have been focused more on continuing to develop Garland and Mobley, and continue to build a team around them before you get that star in place? I don't know, but I do think where I would push back is to say the Knicks really emptied the cupboard, where they had very little room to get better, whereas the Cavs haven't given up all their future. I mean, Garland is still a solid asset. I think there will be trade interest, if and when he's made available.
Not player-wise, but asset-wise, they definitely emptied the cupboard for Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, talking about draft picks, yeah.
And look, they traded. I mean, I know Markkanen wasn't what he was or what he is now then, but he did have a really good season for the Cavs.
Yeah,
they give up Sexton, who, like, again, I mean, he wasn't a perfect piece or anything, but he had already established himself as, hey, I can be an efficient scorer in this league.
Yeah. So they gave up a lot. What I'm saying is the Knicks still really didn't have anything left to trade, right?
You had Shumpert.
So, shout out Shumpert for at least dunking on KG, and that put back in the Indiana series. So they aren't. It isn't quite as, and I do think Mitchell is a little bit easier to build around than Melo. I think he's a better passer than Melo. When Melo was engaged, he was probably a better defender, but that didn't happen often enough. So I think they're in better shape there. And you have to, they are not a free agent destination. So they have an owner who has been. I mean, it's been talked about a lot, going back obviously to that Comic Sans letter he wrote when LeBron left. But there were articles written when LeBron was there about how badly Gilbert had failed. That relationship was never really repaired. I think Gilbert apologized to LeBron when he signed there. But you can see even when they won the title, LeBron's zapping up everyone. He barely acknowledges Gilbert. And I think that beyond LeBron, that front office has been a shit show for a while. Or that ownership is not good. So it's a tough place to win. I think they did the right thing by pushing their chips in for Mitchell. But you paired him with another small guard. This was one reason the Knicks didn't want to do that. And you didn't leave yourself a whole lot of outs. But they're not completely without outs, because I do think they can turn Allen into a useful role player to move Mobley to the 5. Garland, you could probably recoup some of your draft compensation and maybe get like a solid veteran player. They have outs, and then maybe they make you turn Garland somehow into maybe a Paul George, right? If you get enough comp back in terms of picks, you can reroute that to LA, right? With a guy like Allen, I don't know. They are completely they're not in as bad a situation as the Knicks were with Melo. They've already also made it farther 2 years in a row. They've made it as far as that Knicks team did. And they were obviously one of the better teams in the league last year. But to me, I read the Bickerstaff thing as if Mitchell wanted him there, he'd be there. I'm probably a little bit. I think they have more flexibility. I think they have more flexibility than I think you think they have. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think they have flexibility. There's just some Carmelo vibes with Donovan Mitchell. Like, do you want to win a championship or do you want to be the main man somewhere? Do you want to win a championship or do you want to just have a franchise cater to you? Do you like that? Do you like the trappings of being the number one guy, the franchise player? I wonder. I also wonder, like, if all the Brooklyn smoke, which is now, I think it's, I feel like there's a very, very strong chance he's staying in Cleveland at this point, like 95%, I feel confidence. But I wonder if some of the Brooklyn smoke was like, that was an organization he knew he could get to and immediately be the face of the franchise. Obviously, be in a bigger market, even though Brooklyn's not really a big market because they suck. I definitely wonder about that stuff. But hey, if that's what you want, that's what you want. And if you can get it, more power to you. Because I certainly, I don't know. I don't know if too many people would want me to be the face of their franchise. So,
Not even that pygmy thing in Brooklyn.
no, definitely not the pygmy thing in Brooklyn. All right, I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug.
You can find me at Stacy Patton 89. I'll just plug all the great work at Strickland.
Yeah, I have nothing to plug myself, so I will also echo that. Check out everything that we're doing over at Strickland. Everybody enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Also, any Memorial Day weekend plans, Stacey?
Just catching up on some sleep, maybe hoop a little bit. Other than that, I don't know.
Rub one out.
Wow, that was aggressive. Only one? How about yourself?
I'm planning to go see the Mad Max movie at some point, so I'm gonna do that. But yeah, not nothing major. I don't. I always feel like Memorial Day weekends are just. I don't really. It's not like a trip weekend to me. I don't know. I've never enjoyed taking a trip on Memorial Day weekend.
It's I mean, it's nice weather. It's fun to barbecue. You know,
it's good to get it's a good time to have a few
good hike. There's a lot of good hiking up by you, right? So,
yeah, I'll probably do that tomorrow. But yeah, I plan on doing something and maybe having a few cold ones. Just a few though. Nothing more than that. We'll never do more than that.
You're not banning Bud Lights, Shwin? Go along with your patriotism.
Well, real patriots celebrate by drinking Bud Heavy on the big occasions. But it's always a great day to be American. Just kidding. All right. Anyway, let's end it there. I hope everybody has a great Memorial Day weekend. And I will see you on, I don't know, Tuesday, Monday, someday. We'll figure it out and let you know. Peace.